This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast. This is show 265, the September 1st, 2017 edition. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatal, back with you for a final show from the season from the Little House on the East Side. Muggsy the handicapping Labrador under the table. And calling in, not from Planet Texas, but from Planet Del Mar, I believe, is the People's Champion himself, Jonathan Kinchin. JK, what's up, my friend?
Yes. I'm back out in Del Mar. I've been coast to coast. Is probably a light way of saying it. I've been to Saratoga for probably 3 or 4 Saturdays. I've been to Del Mar for 3 or 4 Saturdays. Hanging out with the Prince of Keeneland. Doesn't get any better than this.
The envy of many a racing fan, Jonathan Kinchin, referring to the Prince of Keeneland. Jake Ballas, everyday player, who was here for most of the year, but maybe, just maybe, will end up having a horse in over the weekend out at Del Mar. I'm sure that'll be fun. You're also out there filming, and we don't know if it's in a consolation role or a still competing role for the new television program Win, Play, Show. I had the pleasure this morning, Jonathan, of speaking with Jimmy the Hat Allard, one of the creative minds behind the show, came up with the concept that eventually morphed into this Win, Play, Show TV show that you were a part of. Told me some great stories about acting back in the day and his various run-ins with degenerate horse players, including Telly Savalas and Jack Klugman. Should be a fun article up on DRF.com coming up in the next few hours. Also want people to tune into this program. Tell folks how they can find you.
I believe I've been trying to get our friend Robert to. I don't have TVG, so I'm trying to get him to set the DVR. I believe Tuesday morning is the first episode airs. But I think on TVG HRTV format, it runs 3 times a day in different times. So just check out your DVRs, and I guess you can set it to tape all new episodes, and it'll just tape the new ones. And it, like I said, it starts Tuesday morning. I think maybe 11 o'clock Eastern, maybe 10 o'clock.
I think it's noon. I think it's noon Eastern, okay. 9 Pacific. But I think your idea is the best idea, since it's not always on at the same time, and it is repeating a bunch. So I would just rock the DVR and find it. And just in the horse racing world in general, whenever NBC does coverage, whenever the Breeders' Cup is on, always set your DVR, because I'm not 100% sure, but it counts towards ratings. So it will encourage sponsors to stay involved with racing shows. That's a cool idea. I'll say this, too. It's sometimes just really fun to go back and watch the coverage after the fact. Great work by people like our friends Matt Bernier and Nick Luck, of course. HD racing from different angles. You might be liable to notice something. Other great analysis from astute observers. Is it something you've ever used for actual handicapping, going back and watching, whether it's national broadcasts like the Fox coverage of NYRA or the NBC coverage of the Breeders' Cup? Is that something you've done in the past for more than just to throw racing the ratings, but actually to help you in your horse playing?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I like to watch the NBC coverage. I'm usually, well, at least as of late, I've luckily been able to attend some of the big races. But I love coming back home and watching it. All of those little pieces in between, with the trainer interviews, the jockey interviews after, the paddock interviews. I think you can get some really good nuggets out of that stuff. So I really enjoy watching it. And then the blimp view, or maybe it's not even the blimp. The blimp view is great. To be able to see moves and see where horses were. And then also kind of that infield camera where they kind of follow the horses along that they've had of late. That one's good as well.
Some very cool things to check out. Now, I don't want to ask you to spoil anything, Game of Thrones style here on the show, JK. We've had enough TV spoilers for a little while. But I wanted to ask about your experience with Win, Play, Show. Is this a show that horse players are going to want to check out?
I'm not really sure. And I don't want to cold water the thing. I think I'm not sure exactly how much they're going to edit it. I know that a lot of the stuff that I talked about to my team was some really nice entry level angles and what you're looking for in the form, and also some more in-depth ideas and thoughts. and I know a lot of the other guys did the same thing. We were not allowed to. We were allowed to coach them on the handicapping portion of it, but we are not allowed to give them too much information about how to bet a specific race or an amount to bet or who to bet. We can strongly suggest who we like, but they're pretty – I mean, they sit right on top of us when we have our little 10-minute conversations, and if you cross a line, they'll stop you. So, I guess my concern is that the wagering part of the show is it's very amateurish. And so I wonder if the horse player audience is going to, is going to be interested in that. However, the production value is going to be amazing. They did a really good job with the game and kind of keeping it exciting and changing some things here and there on you. Rules could change in the middle of it. The characters are, the people that they picked are all kind of interesting people. So I think it'll be good. It's not going to be a seasoned horse player is going to tune in with a notepad and take notes. But I do think it'll be an entertaining hour or however long it is of television for sure.
I'm interested to see the interplay between the amateurs and the coaches. Jimmy the Hat intimated to me that there was some gnashing of teeth and pulling out of hair by the coaches who were trying to teach some of the fundamentals of handicapping and maybe not able to get past certain contestants wanting to bet on silks and names, at least at certain points of the show. I think watching you get frustrated with somebody doing that would be as entertaining as anything on TV, frankly. So that's I'm entertained from the point of view of the theater, of the tension between coach and student. And I'm also just curious because sometimes I think, you can learn from watching somebody do something well, and sometimes you can learn by watching somebody do the opposite of what, you learn what not to do by watching the contestants. So it's my hope that there will be something in there for everybody from novices to more seasoned horse players. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, my biggest struggle throughout the entire thing was just not so much my team accepting the handicapping nuggets and the handicapping advice. They were great with that. The hardest thing for me was trying to work through what was or was not a smart or intelligently placed wager, and what was an effective way to play a race. And that was the biggest obstacle because, all horse players know it takes it. It took me the first 5 years I was betting exacta boxes. It took me a long time to realize that that's not really the most efficient way to play the game. And so that was the biggest obstacle. I think a lot of the coaches were frustrated as if their reputation was on the line. I never really felt that was the case. I think if someone judges me based on what my team of newly introduced horse players does, then, what can I do about that?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about that aspect of it. But I think what you're saying makes it sound pretty interesting. The betting piece of the equation, so important. And we see this all the time. We see it at the paddock bar, even among people in our crew. Really, really good handicappers. And I see two separate but equal mistakes. One is an hour to formulate, an hour to come up with the handicapping opinion, the walk from the table to the machine to formulate the bet. That's one mistake I see. And then you just also see, not unlike what you were saying about spending time making exacta boxes and other inefficient wagers, just the lack of efficiency or cleverness in putting together an opinion and just betting it either too on the nose or too spready. Those would seem to be either being too cold or too spready and not being able to actually construct a bet in the way that reflects an opinion. Now, I imagine the kind of bets you're making on the show, you don't really get a chance to fully explain those concepts, Jonathan, but do you think there is something that somebody could get about how to bet from watching the show?
Yeah, I would imagine that a lot of the different guys probably, explain it to their teams in different ways. I know that I explain it one way, some other guy might explain it another way. The best thing I've tried to explain to them is, look, you're going to be wrong more than you're right in this game. So when you're right, you need to have the maximum amount of dollars bet on that right opinion. What I think what the biggest theme is that I kind of heard with all the coaches and teams is that you just had these situations where people would want to bet, okay, say you have $100, they'd want to bet $20 to win on the favorite, $20 to show on the favorite, and then they like the 15-1 shot that their coach made a case for, so they bet $5 to show on that horse. And then, but what about this other horse? Because I like Kenton DeSormer, I'm going to bet $10 to show on that horse too. Yeah, and so essentially they're just like spreading out every combination, every possibility that could happen. And what I kind of coached my team to do is like pick one scenario and then bet that scenario. Just whatever the scenario is, I don't care what it is, just pick a scenario and bet it rather than picking, well, this could happen, that might happen, and maybe this happens.
Yeah, I mean, that's a mistake you see in everyday wagering all the time. That's the end of the spectrum I was talking about, where you're just getting too spready and not allowing yourself to get stuck into an opinion. And the phrase that's come up many times, we're gonna have the T-shirts printed up eventually about crushing their souls, comes to mind. Give yourself an opportunity to reflect an opinion and build within that opinion at least one scenario where you're going to get paid. And according to what Jimmy was telling me in the interview this morning, I do think that's a lesson that some of the contestants have taken to heart. I can't wait till the episodes air, JK, and we can speak about this stuff more freely next week. Once again, it's going to be September 5th, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific is the first iteration of the show. There will be other viewings. Set your DVR, Win Play Show, TVG Network, check local listings. Going to be a whole lot of fun. And I don't know if you're still competing or not, Jonathan, but Godspeed if you are this weekend.
Pete, you think? What do you think?
I don't know. You were talking about your contestants. I know you'll be competing in the parimutuel pools. I just wasn't sure if you were going to be out there firing in the confines of the Win Place Show contest still.
I will say I was very fortunate. My the executive producer that was with my group, she figured out really soon that like I'm very serious about this, and so she was always like, "All right, Jonathan, I need you in 15 minutes. Is that enough time for you to get your bet in? All right, you go bet and then come back." So she was very like accommodating. I'd run and bet and come back, and she put a trip note in her phone. I'm supposed to text her when this horse runs back, who had an awful trip in the last race the last time I was here. So we're gonna get her a winner as soon as that horse.
You can't leave us hanging. What horse are we talking about here? I hope you remember the name after that.
Jeez, no, I'll find it. I'll look right now.
You better find it. You better send it out on Twitter. If you don't follow JK already, he's at UT Big Hair, and make sure that you follow for all the interesting information coming out his way on Twitter and on this program. Let's loop back to some of the stuff we didn't get a chance to finish on last week's show. Then we've got a few listener questions, some of which we might deal with straight away. Others will come into play as we talk about the 5 stakes races we're going to talk about later in the program. 3 from Saratoga, 2 from Del Mar. But first, JK, why don't you recap us on the significant form DQ, and let's chat about that a bit.
Well, I mean, okay. So
remind us what happened first.
They broke from the gate, and it was Irad that was riding, and he came down pretty sharp on top of the 4 horse. It was Dylan Davis right as they were coming into the first turn. I'm trying to get better about my polls. I think it was a 7/8, but maybe I'm just completely wrong about that.
No, it was early in the race. 7/8 sounds right.
Okay, yeah. So he just kind of came down sharp on him. The biggest argument I saw on Twitter was between Richie Migliori and Jeremiah Englehart. Jeremiah thought that the horse took a bad step and kind of pulled himself down in there. Richie believed that he was steered down in there. Steering obviously being extremely dangerous in those situations. And I think after watching it a few times and hearing some interesting stories about how hard those guys ride, and Irad being one of them, I think he was trying to be a little cheeky there, and it probably one of those situations like, I don't have a sister, but a friend or whatever. I mean, I have a sister, but she's older than me. But I wish she wasn't young. I was thinking like a little sister. You kind of punch your little sister in the arm, and then you're like, oh damn, I really didn't mean to hit her that hard, and you didn't realize that you actually hit her that hard. I think it was one of those deals. I don't think Irad was trying to drop Dylan Davis. I think that he was just trying to tighten him up, and it actually came off a lot worse than his intention was.
Yeah, it was an ugly-looking incident for sure. And I'm not sure that either of those guys are wrong in the way that they the comments that Engelhardt said and Richie said they weren't like fully, they had some elements that were at odds, but they weren't fully contradictory. I thought it was a little reckless, for sure, the way the horse went down in there. I also thought that maybe there was and this is so hard to say as a guy who, unlike you, I don't have the picture from Puerto Vallarta. I can pretty much say I've never been on the back of a horse. It did seem like maybe there was a little bit of overreaction in behind, but it was also weird because the horse did take this weird step and kind of jumped. And for all it was so unusual, they had a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not criticizing what anybody did, but I do think that in terms of the steward's adjudication of the event, I think it probably looked worse than it was in terms of being sure that it affected the outcome of the race. So for me in that situation, and let me know what you think of this, going so early in the race especially. Now look, as anyone who listened to the show back in 2014 can attest, I fully believe Byron should have come down in the Breeders' Cup Classic. That incident happened right out of the gate, but it was so extreme and it so changed the way that race played out. I truly believe that a DQ should have happened there. So in my heart, I do believe DQs can happen in the early part of the race. But there was enough question for me with that one that the result I would have preferred was let the race stand, give Irad days. I felt like that would have been more fair and involved less God playing by the stewards in a situation where clearly the best horse won the race. What do you think the stewards should have done? What do you think of my opinion?
No, I mean, I think if you're doing things like that, you got to take the horse down. I absolutely hate when they don't DQ a horse, but then fine or suspend the rider. Whoa. So he did something wrong, but the better doesn't matter. Because if the idea is if you bet the 4 horse and Irad did something to interfere with the 4 horse, then that's not fair. That can't happen.
I disagree. I think you're hurting the bettor more by sort of playing God and trying to say, hey, that determined that cost a placing. I feel like bettors, and I understand vertical wagering makes this confusing, but especially thinking about the horizontal bettor, they bet the best horse won, and you're punishing them for a move early in the race that may or may not have cost a horse a placing. That said, the move by Irad, in my view, was dangerous enough that you can't just have guys doing that willy-nilly. So I feel like it is appropriate in this specific instance to punish the rider without changing the results on the racetrack.
Well, yeah, but I think that you just don't want to set a precedent that's what that the riders, we talk about it all the time. The riders can dictate the outcome with herding and being overly aggressive, and I just think that it's probably better if that doesn't exist. Now, if it's my horse that I bet on, I would like for my rider to be aggressive, but I think as a whole, the game probably needs it to be as safe as it possibly can and as honestly run as it possibly can.
Yeah, I don't feel like it. I mean, I agree, and I think the herding stuff, we've talked about this also at great length on the show in New York, is dangerous and silly, and that they only will do the takedown when the contact occurs, when, to me, the sort of spirit of the rule, when you're carrying out several paths, you're creating a dangerous situation and somebody's going to get dropped, and I don't. I'm with you. I think they're too lenient most of the time on that. I just felt like this time it was very aggressive for something that may or may not have actually changed the numbers going across the board.
To me, it's like, and maybe this is a bad analogy. Sometimes I do well with analogies. Sometimes I swing and miss. But to me, it's kind of like drunk driving, right? It's like just because you didn't get in an accident and kill someone doesn't mean that it's not a problem. Like, you shouldn't ever drunk drive. And Irad's move could have potentially killed Dylan Davis. And, they can't do that. You can't do things. You cannot make actions that could cause someone to lose their life. And just because they didn't doesn't mean it wasn't a problem. It's a problem. And so I'm fine with them being strict in that regard. I mean, I think that there's some cheeky DQs that happen that I wish didn't happen. But when someone's life is in danger, I'm never going to be one that's going to speak that the rules are too strict. And I know that's not what you're saying, but
no, but I understand
no
where
problem.
you're coming from. But I just think there's a massive inconsistency. I think what you're arguing is essentially that a foul is a foul and should be punished. But that's not how they adjudicate on a day-to-day basis. So it's just hard for me to accept it when they somewhat arbitrarily do that in this situation. Is that fair?
Yeah, 100%. I've heard Andy Serling say it a lot of times. It's not that he doesn't always agree or disagree with the rules. It's the fact that he feels like at NYRA they're more consistent than other places, and he doesn't agree with it. But at least they're consistent about it. They don't ever take horses down for herding without contact.
That's
true.
He
thinks it's dangerous.
They do let you herd
he thinks it should
with impunity.
Yeah.
Right or wrong. I just felt like this was, it's so early in the race. The horse is so much the best. It made me a little crazy. And obviously, I lost money on the situation. But I think my opinion would be exactly the same had I been put up with not the best horse in the race. It's just the kind of thing that it sticks in my craw. And again, I'm not somebody who thinks just because it happened early, it can't affect the outcome. It just seemed like a real leap to me that definitely changed the placings in the race. And if they want to change it to where a foul is a foul and you do something dangerous, you get DQ'd. Yeah, to me, this wasn't an example of consistent stewarding. I guess that's where I land on it at the end of the day. But,
Arethusa.
What's that?
Arethusa.
What's Arethusa?
That's the horse that's going to win next time. That was at Del Mar off that trip.
Oh, nice. Good dig on that. And spell it so people can put it in their DRF stable mail.
Arethusa.
Just like it sounds. Arethusa. There you go. Hopefully another winner for the DRF Players podcast. Hey, congrats to our buddy Chris Pipito, who was on the show last Friday. Had a real good day, including that nice tout on By the Moon, a horse that I noticed, JK, you didn't include when you did your out of the gate recording for your pick six play, but ended up putting in a sort of a last minute addition. Was it the Piper who pushed you over the edge?
Well, in all fairness, the ticket that I gave on out of the gate, I said at the beginning, this is my all A's. If you want some B's, tune in to the. So I used By the Moon as a B horse in the pick six that we hit. I did not use By the Moon as an A horse. So I didn't. I mean, I think if they run if it's an honestly run race, she doesn't win.
Well, there is that.
I mean, but what's that saying about my aunt and my uncle?
There you go.
So right. So I mean, but I do believe that she ran well. She ran well, and the Piper probably pushed me a little bit. Nick Tamero used the horse a little bit too. We talk about it all the time. People always ask me, like, what can I do to kind of get better? Surround yourself with good handicappers, and you'll find yourself getting better.
And I'll only toot my own horn about this because so many of my friends who were a piece of that big party pick six on Sunday, thank Jonathan, said, well, Jonathan, we did have a conversation right before the pick six went in with JK basically saying, like, use By the Moon or don't use By the Moon. And I was firmly in the use By the Moon camp. By the Moon, a horse, by the way, who was picked on the very first edition of the DRF Players podcast ever back in, I guess now 3 years ago, back in the fall of 14, right before my rants about Bayern started. We had in whatever the 2-year-old filly stake at the time was. So I had to tell my friends, you can thank Jonathan yourself. Thank me. But man, it was a super day up there. Truly a lot of fun, and one that one of those days, if you could bottle that feeling, you could sell racing to everybody. We had a question come in, JK, about betting strategy. This is an interesting one, and it's a very specific question. But I think you're going to probably give it a general answer. But I'm going to ask the specific question. Don't feel obligated to get bogged down in the particulars if you want to come at it from a more general point of view. In the various bets, pick 6, pick 4, pick 3, daily double, in other words, in horizontal wagers, what are the most and least number of combinations you would wager in each type?
You've seen me do it probably more than once. I'll play a pick 4 or pick 5 with 4 or 5 singles. I've done that before, so there's no limit to it. I mean, I played on a day at Santa Anita when West Coast ran, Lord Simba ran, and someone else, I can't remember who it was. It's really not that important, I guess. Maybe Dancing Candy or something. Anyways, I bet a $100 ice cold pick 4. So there's no limit to that. I mean, I missed. No, I missed. There's a minimum, and I missed 3 of those legs, by the way, so no one thinks I was bragging. And then the maximum, the only real rule I have is I don't hit the all button. And I don't have a problem with you using multiple horses. You can use 8 horses in a leg. It depends on what your goal is, right? If your goal is to score out, then it's a little bit different. I just would prefer to. I'll use 8 horses in a leg as long as I bet it efficiently. We've talked about that before. If I'm going to play a pick 3 where I like 2 horses in the first leg, I like 8 horses in the second leg, and then I like 2 horses in the third leg, I'm just going to try to bet that as efficiently as possible. At least I'll group half of those 8 horses on one ticket, and then half of the other 8 on the other 4 on another ticket, where at least I'm betting the 4 that I think are the most likely heavier. I don't want a caveman tickets. If you're cavemanning tickets, then you can get in trouble. You can get upside down on your investment by using too many horses.
And what do you mean by that, upside down?
Upside down meaning that there's a potential that you could win and lose money.
Yep.
You go 2 by 8 by 2, so we're looking at a $32 ticket, and it comes favorite, and the pick 3 pays $18. It's like, well, that's a problem for me. I don't allow myself to get in those situations anymore. And the other thing we've talked about it passingly when it comes to multi-race bets is really draw your ticket and then look at it. If you're using 5, 6, 7, 8 horses in the first leg or the last leg or the second leg, then don't play the pick 5. Just skip the first leg and then play the pick 4 back starting in race 2. Or, and the same thing can be said for the late pick 5 or late pick 4. If you're using 8 horses in the first leg of the late pick 5, then don't play the late pick 5. Skip that and play the late pick 4. And instead of wasting all your money betting all of those 8 combinations from the first leg, you can have it for more times and hit the pick 4, because really all you're doing, if you're using 8 horses, you don't know. You have no clue. You're guessing and you're hoping. And like we've talked about before, I try not to bet with hope and bet with what I think is going to happen.
The key thing about betting in general is the ability to write wagers that match your opinion of what's going to happen in a sequence. And that comes down to weighting combinations correctly, and it comes down to choosing the right pools as well. We talk a lot of the time about how we all have different wagering personalities. Well, betting sequences have personalities too. And when there's one where you're seeing several races in a sequence that really narrow down, that's one where you're going to want to try to limit the amount of lines you're playing, use fewer horses, and hit it more times. Then there might be a sequence where it's absolutely okay to go completely the other way and spread in all 3 legs, potentially. Let's say if you have a couple of horses in each leg you can X out, and you don't like the favorites. Then maybe it's okay to play I don't do it very often, but maybe a 5 by 3 by 4 pick 3 can be a good wager depending on, as JK said, what your goal is and what you think is going to happen in the sequence. The other question that you have to ask yourself, getting back to the base question about how few or how many combinations to play in different bets, is what's your budget for the day and what are your goals for the day? I'm the type of player, it's hard to do, and it's really hard to do at a place like Saratoga where it feels like you're on vacation even when you're working hard. But you're a lot better off, rather than trying to spend $10 in 11 races at Saratoga, taking that $110 budget for the day and putting it all to the sequence that you have the most conviction about. So before you look at whether or not, how many combinations to play, look at your overall budget for the day and then try to find bets that fit within that budget. I think if you take a more holistic approach to your bankroll and where to put your money, you're going to end up necessarily making smarter, more efficient wagers. You think that sounds about right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everything's, in racing, there should be no absolutes. And like you said, the example you gave of spending 4 hours handicapping and then betting on the fly as you're walking up to the window, I've gotten to the point where I spend more time constructing my wager than I do in races.
No, and I think there's a good lesson in that. I think it's more than half the equation, and the more time we spend around people who do this for a living, I think if you could give their picks, like the best players in the country, give their picks to people, just your average horse player who has no special affinity for betting. I still think they're going to be lucky to win. Those rando players are going to be lucky to win at the end of the day. If you give a halfway decent set of picks to one of those pro players, I firmly believe they're going to still make money. And that, to me, speaks to how important I think the betting piece of the equation is. I think it's way more important than handicapping at this point. The way that my view of horse racing has evolved, that's where I probably in the old days would have said, oh, it's 50-50. I don't think it is 50-50. I think the betting stuff is way more important. Any pushback on that idea?
No, not at all. It's one of the things that I've had to adjust, which was not understanding and seeing how many people make poor wagers. And this isn't picking because I love him, but a friend of ours, I won't even say his name. My best bet of the day when we were at Saratoga one day ran second to his best bet of the day, and I made a ton of money and he busted out. So my point to him was simply that, like, look, dude, it's not you were a better handicapper today than I was. I just bet it better. And I said, how many tickets do you have in your pocket? And he showed me how many tickets he had from the day of betting. And he had like 7 tickets. And I pulled out like 150, 50-cent combinations of a bunch of different stuff. I didn't bet that much more than him. But the point is that I was betting more efficiently than he was. He was just betting, he's just going up there and betting da-da-da-da-da and da-da-da-da-da real quick. And that was the difference. And he didn't make any money because he didn't bet it very well. Although he had the handicapping crown for the day. And I think that's an important lesson, that it's not just your opinion, it's how you leverage your opinion.
Oh, that's well put. And I mentioned before the problem of being too spready being a very common one in the way people make bets. There's another subset of players for whom it's the exact opposite. They're too cold in their opinions. And in the new book, which is actually, I think we're finally going to have books within a month at this point, from what I hear, Jonathan, of the new Mike Maloney book called Betting with an Edge. Should be some nice marquees up on the DRF.com website soon. But he talks about his dad. His opinion was his opinion, and it was beneath his dignity. His long shot he loved, and his long shot would run second to the obvious favorite, and he'd have had the exact his long shot over the favorite, but wouldn't have it flipped the other way. There's a stubbornness that gets into some people where they'll be just too wedded, too one way about their opinion, and that's another danger. I think it's less common. I think the spreadiness is sort of the more common novice mistake, but I think even some seasoned players could do well to learn lessons about not being too stuck in their ways either. And obviously a lot of good betting advice in the new Maloney book. If folks enjoyed this conversation, you'll definitely enjoy all the stuff in there about money management and betting strategy and how to efficiently convert your opinion into wagers into the tote system. JK, we've got about 25 minutes left in the show here, and we haven't started talking about these races yet. I think we should dive in. Let's turn things on their head a little bit, and let's start out where you are with Del Mar. Have you had a chance to look at the Debutante and the other big stakes race out there this weekend?
I have, yeah. I've taken a look at them. and ironically enough, the horse drawn down to the inside, Gabrielle Elizabeth. We had a breakfast this morning with the trainer Eric Guillot, who is a riot, and I got to tell him about how one of my biggest scores was on Champagne Doro, so that got him going. He was super excited about that.
How was Mr. Guillot? Character as always.
Oh, he never disappoints. The times I've interacted with him, he never disappoints.
Anything specific he give you from the story from the Champagne Doro era, maybe?
No, nothing really. He just I almost asked about Bayern and Moreno, but I didn't have the heart to do that. I didn't want to get them all riled up.
All right, well, let's move on to your handicapping thoughts on this Del Mar debutante. Certainly an interesting handicapping puzzle out here. Who did you end up with?
Well, first of all, I mean, I think Justice Smidge is something special, and Bob obviously knows how to win this race and the colt version of this race. So, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, that he's extremely live in here. But Moonshine Memories is interesting. Back off of 14 days rest. Not exactly a Simon Callahan move, but on time form, the figure last one. Mike Smith ends up on Poetic for Mandela, which I thought was interesting, instead of Moonshine Memories. But maybe it was a deal where he had kind of already committed to Poetic because he didn't assume that Moonshine Memories was going to run back in 14 days.
Yeah, you'd have to
I
assume
think if Moonshine
that.
Memories,
you'd have to assume he'd already given the call.
Right.
Not that it would be a crazy decision to stick with Poetic, but I just don't think you can read anything into it because of the change in plans with Moonshine Memories.
Right, yeah. So for me, it's if Moonshine Memories runs, my top pick with that right there will be Moonshine Memories. Obviously, Justice Smidge will take a ton of money, and I think Moonshine Memories could get lost a little bit.
Do you give Poetic a chance? It looks very interesting to me to come running and, at the very least, end up in the number. Wasn't really expected to win first out, going off at 9-1 in there, but that race has produced some nice form. Wasn't exactly a blistering pace. She went and got him. She just seems so progressive and interesting. Maybe even better for when they stretch out a little bit more, but definitely one for vertical players I would have my eye on.
Yeah, I would look at her for sure, especially with Timeform US having the first part of that race is blue, suggesting that it was slower than average. So that's a big accomplishment for her to get home, going 5.5, closing into a pace for Richard Mandela, who doesn't usually have him cranked and ready to rock and roll. I'm not crazy about the fact that she was 9-1 on debut. I do understand that it's Mandela, but for her to win as easy as she did at the end, I would have liked for her to take a little bit more money. Maybe she just kind of caught a little bit of a lighter field. Maybe 23-1 ran second, 4-1 ran third. The favorite didn't run at all in that spot. So she's definitely not one I would talk someone off of. But Moonshine Memories at 6-1 morning line is a lot more interesting to me.
I did mention the True Royalty came back to win, but I suppose it is notable that win came with a 59 buyer speed figure, certainly less than what it's going to take to win this running of the debutante. How do you see the pace shaking out in here?
Timeform says Moonshine Memories is loose. I think that it's a little bit tricky when they're babies. They don't have a lot of races to kind of lean on. They're stretching from 5.5 to 7. Guillot's got speed down from the inside. C. Moreno and Lauban, if you're questioning what he's going to do with that horse, I think that they're going to run a little bit here. I wouldn't fall for the slow pace I wouldn't fall for the slow pace that Timeform suggests is going to be there.
Yeah, that would certainly bring, I would think, the Mandela filly into it a little bit more Poetic if the pace were to heat up a little bit. Be interesting to see what happens. We did have a question come in about 2-year-old races in general, and it was specifically, and I'm not sure that we're definitely the right guys to answer this, as we're both more horizontal players, but I did have one thought I wanted to share, but I'll ask it to you first, Jonathan. Any specific strategies for vertical wagers, exacta, trifecta, etc., in 2-year-old races?
No. I mean, I don't have one, but like you said, I don't typically play those situations. I mean, I guess off the top of my head, the two that I would consider using if I was someone said, hey, 10 minutes a post, make a ticket, I would look for speed to stick around. You know, who's going to go to the front? That's a great horse to kind of key in third and fourth, I would think, to kind of stick around while all the other ones are trying to figure out what it's like to pass horses. And then look for a kind of a pedigree play where it's a horse that's clearly progressive type. This is not the battle they came to fight. They're just here to get a race into them. And down the line where you're going to want them, a Giant's Causeway or some pedigree that screams, I want to run for 2 miles to kind of come pick up a piece late. But other than that, I don't have anything like in stone.
Those are both good ideas. I'd say with 2-year-old races, and this is true of all races, but I think it's particularly true in 2-year-old races, you'll see plenty of situations where the best horse, beyond the winner, the second best horse, the third best horse in the race often don't hit the verticals because they end up trying the winner. You'll often see a situation in these 2-year-old races where you get a horse who's the best of speed, and we're talking dirt here specifically, and they'll maybe beat off the other speed who will weaken and run third or fourth or worse, and you'll get a situation where a slower horse, a bigger odds, slower horse, ends up getting a good setup to come and pass horses for second and third. So that's one thing that, and maybe it applies to Poetic in this spot. I'm not saying she can't win too, but if others are aggressive and going to be trying to win, and a lot of times, you'll lose that pace battle and then you'll also lose the war. So that's one idea I have, especially if you could find a horse who's shown they can pass horses in a 2-year-old race, especially a 2-year-old stake. They can be very interesting to key around, not necessarily to get the money and to win, but to run up into the number at potentially an overlaid price. Any thoughts on that plan?
No, it makes it try to find a way to you want to try to find a way to kind of go against the grain. Bet those horses in these 5.5 furlong races to kind of break well, finish, and win. If you can find something that might not break so sharp from a trainer who isn't known to kind of get him to rock and roll first time out, it's definitely an angle that you can make some money on.
Yeah, there's not too many instances in the game where I can make you a case of why a slower horse is going to beat a faster horse. But in these 2-year-old races, I feel like it happens a lot underneath. Let's move on to the maybe. Where did you end up going in here, Jonathan?
The maybe. Let me pull up my note. Oh, my girl is back.
Yeah, decked out.
My old pal. Yeah, my old pal. She's been off for a while. Kent knows her really well. I think I've shared before a couple of situations where we've discussed that she doesn't like to stick. He knows that. He rides her that way. I think the 1 1/8 is perfect for her. I think maybe 1 1/4 might be a tad bit too long. If you look at her 1 1/8 races, she wins by a nose, lost by a head, lost by a neck. She's always there in those spots. Wins by 2. I think that distance is perfect for her. She's run well here at Del Mar, which is a kind of a horse for course type of spot. And Kent rides the turf really well here too. So, check the workout report just to be sure that she's going in the right direction. But I think she'll run really well in this spot.
I was going to cast a vote for number 4, Cambodia, later developing mare for Proctor, who I thought ran really well in the yellow ribbon, faces a lot of the same rivals here today. Drawn nicely in the 4-path. Was hoping maybe she could get it done. Did you have any thoughts on her or any of the others in this field, Jonathan?
No, I thought that she's one that could get it done. It's one of those wide open races where if someone tells you they love one horse and that they're like singling, I would slap them.
Isn't that the exact time like to single when you can go 8? Don't you always say if you can go 8 ways? And then you can single. That's a good thing. Aren't you going to have to slap yourself based on what you just said?
No, I do have that thought, but it's a little bit different. I believe in singling when there's a standout that that wise guys are going to try to beat. And the prime example I'll give you is, that we've talked about before was Classic Empire and the Breeders' Fraternity when he drew the 11 post. There's a Dale Roman stretching out. There was this horse doing this, and that one's kind of interesting, drawn to the inside, and this one maybe that, and and you got 5-2 on Classic Empire, and you won for fun. So, it's in this situation there really is 10 horses that can win because it's on the grass. Trip is so important in those situations. So whoever trips out is going to end up winning. I would have a hard time, lapping onto one horse.
Fair enough. Let's move back east to Saratoga. We'll start off with another favorite of the show, Yoshida. I've been having this thought a lot lately about some subtler things that go into trip handicapping turf races. And I've talked to our buddy Chris Pipito about this. He's good, I think, at noticing this type of thing. There are certain trips, while they are not technically bad trips, and some horses run fine with that trip, that trip doesn't work for other horses. And I'll give you two examples. And maybe that one of these might be worthy of a longer discussion, which we might have to put a pin in. But Antono's trip in the Ballston Spa. I don't think on its face you'd call that a bad trip. But for her, who seems so much more comfortable tucked in behind on the rail, being with no cover, pressing 2 wide, 3 wide, whatever she was doing, wasn't super comfortable. I thought Yoshida, last time out in the Hall of Fame Stakes, with that similar kind of theoretically good trip, pressing, but without cover, maybe wasn't as comfortable as he would have been if he'd been able to switch trips with bricks and mortar, getting cover inside, outside, produce one run. And obviously Yoshida still finished up pretty well in that race. I was just thinking, maybe have they learned something about Yoshida? Can we give Yoshida one more chance, maybe with a slightly different type of trip, and maybe he can get the jump this time on bricks and mortar? What do you think of my general concept in this spot, Jonathan, and what do you think of this race specifically?
Here today, I love him. The fact that he's
you broke up a minute there. We didn't hear the first part of what you said.
Oh, I said I love him. I love him in here today.
Yoshida.
Yoshida. He's drawn inside. The 5 and the 7 both have speed. Voodoo Song having more. They're going to both go. He's going to tuck right in there on the inside of the inner turf with Irad. He's going to be patient, and I think this is going to be the one bricks and mortar with a much better trip. I think if you look at his last 2 races, Yoshida, the time form US early has been blue, and so I think he's not relaxed like I think that the riders would like him to. He's kind of been on the bridle a little bit. I think he might shut off if he gets some cover and they're running in front of him a little bit. I think he's going to be extremely dangerous in this spot, and I think he'll kind of take back his role as the leading 3-year-old turf horse.
Interesting story with Voodoo Song, who you mentioned, having won 3 times at the meet already, going for victory number 4. They were looking at running in an allowance race on Monday, stuck on the AE list, so they decided to try the deep end of the pool. It would be a heck of a story, but can you see this horse possibly managing the 4-peat? Is there a scenario?
I've seen about 17 horses that have no business winning on the front end in the last 2 weeks. So, the horse could definitely win. But he's going to, there's a different class of horse that'll be running him down late. And I think, like I said, Yoshida could get the same trip down inside. Same trip that Manny got on Catholic Boy the other day in the stake, where he kind of, buried down inside the whole time, tipped out around one horse and won for fun.
Those inside-out trips have been working great on the turf. It hasn't been all speed all the time. There's definitely been some days where it seemed like just being inside was what you wanted. Funny you mentioned about Catholic Boy. Great to see Jonathan Thomas, who I worked with many years ago at the Saratoga Special in the Winner's Circle, of course, in the Robert Lapenta Silks, and our friend John Panagot, the racing manager for there. Did I tell you what happened? I think I accidentally stuck my foot in it a little bit, JK. I was trying to say something nice about the horse, but I think I basically accidentally told them they tripped out, and that's why they won the stake.
Well, they tripped out, so
I felt like a heel, though. It's not what you want to hear an hour after you win a graded stake. I think I was trying to let them off the hook for not telling me to bet it all on Catholic Boy. I was pointing out that it was a competitive race, et cetera, et cetera. But seriously, that's just a great training job, and that horse had run really well in the first race, overcoming the slow pace. Tripping out or no, did what needed to be done and got the job done in a stake at Saratoga. And as I told them, I never mind losing when it's to the good guys.
100%.
Let's move on to the Spinaway. Does this one just shape up as a match between Pure Silver and Separation of Powers to you, or is there a little bit more to it?
I don't think it's a match. I think it's Separation of Powers. I think that the second most likely winner is a horse that I just can't bet on. I just can't see myself betting on Flotus. So, or that's not Flotus. That's the first daughter, isn't it? Do they have that? Is that what they call it? No, I think
say the horse's actual name. You're confusing people at this point.
Lady Ivanka.
There you go.
No, I think that Separation of Powers is going to win. What's funny is Separation of Powers and Pure Silver both were advantageous trips last time on the good part of the track. They were both essentially with the track. But I thought Separation of Powers had a lot more in the tank. I think that, we were actually, you weren't. Me and Nick Tamero were with John Nichols, John the Clocker, and John thought that Separation of Powers was going to need longer, was worried about the gate situation, and now that horse gets longer, proved that the gate situation is not a problem. I would expect that horse to run off the screen. Lady Ivanka's a little bit sneaky because her figures are pretty close to the other two, yet she was not in an advantageous bias situation. So if you can stomach betting on that one, go ahead. I'm going to stick to Separation of Powers.
I like Separation of Powers for the distance reason that you cited. I wasn't with Big John when he mentioned that to you, but she certainly shaped like one who wanted longer, and I'm definitely buying that argument. Are you like leave Pure Silver off the tickets anti, or just?
Yeah, well, I won't have her on the ticket. If she wins, look, when you're in a 5-horse field and there's two horses that are going to be odds on even money, like you can't play both of them. You cannot do that. You got to just pick one. That's how I look at it.
So you feel
don't
like
play the sequence,
and you feel like Pure Silver last time was with the track.
Yeah, with the track. I mean, they both were, but she was with the track, and Separation of Powers with the track. Pure Silver has run 3 times, so it's not like she can't still improve. But you would think that you've gotten closer to her best performance than you have with Separation of Powers. Separation of Powers has the extra furlong to work with. I mean, there's a million reasons why I prefer Separation of Powers. The only one I don't prefer is the fact that Johnny's drawn outside. But I think Separation of Powers will be tough.
All right, let's talk about the Woodward. We'll do the side story first. We talked about the stewards before. And an interesting / strange decision that was made. Strange decision here with Ron Paolucci wanting to run a rabbit and the stewards not allowing that. Now, they did this too in the Whitney, and my problem there was I feel like you should be allowed to run a rabbit if you're coupled in the betting. What gets to be weird and unfair to the bettors is when you're asking bettors to bet on a horse as a separate betting interest who doesn't really have any chance of winning. That's what they allowed in the Whitney. Is this an overcorrecting situation by not letting the horse run at all? Shouldn't they have just run the horse as part of an entry, JK?
Yeah, I don't know the full story. Didn't Ron want to? He wanted to enter. He wanted to be as a coupled entry, right? It was like he was asking to be separate. He wanted to be in as a coupled entry. I think.
I think that was. I don't remember that part of the story. There is an article on DRF.com right now about it that is worth that's worth checking out to maybe get a few more particulars. But yeah, it's. I think that he probably would have wanted it. I mean, I don't think it would have mattered to him one way or the other. And I know the stewards have the discretion to do it either way.
I will say this, and this is a little bit of a subject change, but it needs to be said out loud. I know a lot of times he gets a lot of, people kind of poke at him a little bit. I don't know if you saw this thing he did on Twitter, but he gave he gave a weekend to 3 war veterans and a guest. Travel, hotel, to and from the track, dinner, paddock passes, and wagering money in honor of war story running. So I thought that was pretty awesome and needed to be acknowledged for sure.
Very, very cool. Well, what's your take, though, on the whole situation about, or do you just not care one way or the other about the stewards not letting him run a horse?
I mean, I think it's stupid, but I mean, I don't know why they wouldn't. I just don't. I mean, I don't know what their argument is, but
yeah, I mean, they've been doing
but
this
at the same time, I don't know
all the time. It's happened all the time for more than a century. So I get it. Protect the bettors. Don't let the people in the backyard who don't know waste their money on a horse who has no chance. But at the same time, I don't think it would matter anyway. Just like it didn't matter in the Whitney, but it just seemed like a strange move.
Is that their argument? That's what they're doing. They're protecting the $2 bettor in the backyard.
I mean, I don't know. No, it can't be, because they could do that by coupling it. It's almost like, I remember reading the article about the Whitney, and I remember the steward specifically saying that they thought the 20 claimer who was running. I remember them saying like, "Oh, it's not just a rabbit. They think this horse can win, and that's why they're allowing it." Which maybe they got hoodwinked, maybe they misunderstood, but very clearly that horse had no chance of winning the race and wasn't entered to win the race. So maybe they felt hoodwinked and were like punishing him for this. Because
I got a question.
Yeah,
I got a question. If Shug McGahee and the Phipps wanted to enter a rabbit in the Grade 1 Woodward, would they allow them to do it?
I mean, I think based on theoretically, I mean, if it was my decision, I would allow it, and you couple them in the betting, and you're done with it. I don't know what these stewards.
I feel like this is more of a. I think it's more of a Ron thing. I think that him being outspoken and kind of being a lightning rod and blah. I think it's more of a. I think if the Phippses wanted to do it, they would make it work. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. Don't get me wrong. I just think that in the world, like, certain people get to do certain things and others don't. And I would think that it wouldn't be nearly the ordeal if someone of their stature wanted to do it versus someone like Ron.
The whole thing's weird. And once again, from the stewards, we just ask for consistency. People are going to run rabbits. Couple them in the betting so we don't have situations like that embarrassing situation last year in, what was it, the Bowling Green or the Sword Dancer. Anyway, you can go back and listen to the rant on that show if you want to hear that. Rabbits are okay. They're part of the game. If they can make the race legitimately, just couple them in the betting and be done with it. Let's talk about who's going to win the Woodward, JK. Will it take you more than 2 words?
No, only take me 2 words.
Are the words gun and runner?
No, they're rally and cry. No, I look, I do think Gun Runner's going to win, but I will have some money on Rally Cry. If just from a pure figure standpoint, the last race that Rally Cry ran on this track at this distance, the figure was right there with what Gun Runner did, and Rally Cry's going to get that Todd Pletcher, Johnny Velasquez, sit second, stalking Gun Runner deal, and we've talked about it before. If Floron's not going that great right now, and if he gets out there and gets extra conservative and goes 49 to the half, or 48-4, or 48.73 as Larry Colmus is now calling it, that's not going to be good for him. And Rally Cry could run him down late. If he doesn't open up and put Rally Cry to bed early, there's a chance that Rally Cry could nail him. I mean, I think Gun Runner is going to win. A majority of my wagers will go through Gun Runner, but I do think that Rally Cry is live for sure.
What percentage in the picks? How would you...
Probably like 80-20, 80%, 80-20.
Still, that's value-wise, that means you're going to probably end up rooting for Rally Cry.
Yeah, an $800 pick 3. No, I'm not going to bet that much, but $800 pick 3, Yoshida to Separation of Powers to Gun Runner, and then a $200 ending with Rally Cry.
I love it. I love it. All right, we are just about out of time, JK. Thank you so much for making the travel arrangements work. We had to get the show on a little late this week, but we got it out there, and we appreciate all your efforts and all that you do. I want to thank everybody, most of all, for tuning in and listening, especially those of you who ask questions. You make our job a lot easier. Yes, sir.
Final thought.
You got one. Hit me.
Don't tweet me or tweet us if you find it. But it is a fun little thing. There is a name of a racehorse that is in at Del Mar or Saratoga on Saturday that I don't know how they got it by the Jockey Club. If you can find it, congratulations. Don't tweet us about it. But just when you see us, tell us that you found it. Or you can just tweet us that you found it, but don't tweet us what it is.
It's that bad, huh?
Oh, my God. It's unbelievable.
And this is Monday at Del Mar or Saratoga.
No, tomorrow, Saturday. Saturday at Del Mar or Saratoga.
Saturday is PPs, Del Mar or Saratoga. Something that we'll talk about more transparently the next time we do a podcast after dark, NSFW from the dungeon. How about that? How about that for a deal? Hopefully with special guest, the Sultan of Schenectady, Chris Pipino, to get some of his stories told in the way that God intended. Anyway, we got to get out of here, JK. But I'm glad you threw that up there. Thanks once again, everybody, for listening. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. We will be back on Tuesday, God willing. May you win all your photos.